It's Monday night. I'm always happy on a Monday and Wednesday night because I get to be with Rose or Marah on a Monday and Wednesday night. Tonight,
on a Tuesday. Forget about Tuesday.
Morning, exactly. So all that to say is that Rose is a hero. 4 a.m. this morning, I called her on her phone and she gets up. But we are changing our times in the future. We will be having a little different times because 2 years Rose has been getting up pretty early, or I've been going to bed pretty late, and we love what we do, but it is volunteer. So we're starting to take care of ourselves in a different way. Enough about me. This is TMS Roundtable Global. Tonight, my name is Dr. Tova Goldfein. We have really a wonderful guest from Israel, and Rose. Good morning, Rose Hoyt from Melbourne, Australia, my hero.
Good morning, folk. You know, we've got Joan Jacobs today. Now, Joan has got a background in homeopathy. My apologies. So, and she, you know, we've all heard of the Bach Flower remedies. I'm sure we have. And I'm sure everyone in their cupboard has got the little anxiety drops to put under your tongue. Rescue remedy. So here we've got someone who can actually come from that background and tell us how we can be healed. Now, each week we bring you someone different, someone with different attributes. Now, each of these people have allowed patients to actually open up their inner lives and free themselves, whether that's doing Alan Gordon's work or Sachs's work or whatever. It's a conduit to self-reflection in a way. Now, Joan has gone one step further, and she's able to actually tell you where your symptoms arise. And she's going to share some of her understanding and her knowledge with you all, so that if you don't watch this program this morning, it's on YouTube anyway, and you can open it at any time you like and pick through it and see what's good for you. And I think that Joan's message is a very important message for us all, whether or not we've recovered from somatic pain or whether we've never had somatic pain, but that our body keeps the score, as Bessel van der Kolk says. So welcome, Joan.
Thank you, Rose.
Tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then the evolution as to how you got into this way. And and we'll leave the floor to you, and tell us more.
Okay, so just to kind of give an overview of my professional background, I'm an emotional healing specialist, but my expertise is actually working with people who are dealing with physical disease, mainly chronic and severe disease, and people in crisis. And I've been treating people for 35 years. Almost 20 of them I was teaching at the Faculty of Health Sciences at the Ben Gurion University. 10 years I was program coordinator at a complementary health related college here in Israel. I've written 4 books. I established an online magazine in Hebrew. And for over the past few years, I produced 2 online international conferences under the title Non-Toxic Cancer Treatments, which people can view free of charge. So I'm really into it, Rose.
You are.
And Joan has been on my show in Israel twice already. Yes. So we're excited to have her on the Global Show tonight, this morning.
But my personal background actually kind of started on a whole different tone, because I grew up in a family of doctors. My dad was a gastroenterologist, my mom a registered nurse, and the whole concept of, doctors are God and know everything, and all you have to do is ask and they'll solve all your problems, was laid on really heavy.
Wow.
And when I was a kid, I really wasn't a sick kid. I had 2 incidences that, you go to the doctor and the pediatrician said, he doesn't know what it is. He doesn't know what to do. Okay, so here I am growing up with this statement of, all you have to do is go to the doctor and they'll solve all your problems. And every time I'm taken to a doctor, the doctor says, I don't know what to do. And that kind of sound just seemed weird to me. And I was too young to put the dots together, but I kept observing. And the highlight was when I was 16, I developed psoriasis. And again, they took me to the dermatologist, and the dermatologist said, "Oh yeah, that's psoriasis, and it's probably going to get a lot worse, and there's nothing we can do about it. You're going to have to live with that." And without really being aware of it, there was a voice in me that said, "Over my dead body. That's not going to
Good
happen.
on you.
That's not going to happen. No way." And
See, we've got a defiance coming up. Yes.
okay, so it's sort of like unconsciously, I sort of vowed that I would find a solution. There has to be a different way. It can't be that there's no solution. And without really knowing, that sort of reset the whole course of my life. Because if I would have gone the course that I was dedicated to, I probably would have been a neurosurgeon or something like that. And I couldn't deal with the discrepancy between what was said and what actually happened. There's definitely origin there of distrust in the medical establishment, which, looking back, was actually a blessing because it really motivated me to find solutions that would enable me to be independent of the medical establishment, which I think I achieved more or less, other than acute
Right then and there,
appendicitis.
but throughout your life growing up, there was a conflict in your relationship with your parents and what you were thinking and what you were seeing happening. There was like a constant, I imagine it was starting then.
Well, there was a conflict in the reality, but there was no conflict inside me. I really feel blessed to have been born with a very strong backbone, and I believed in the way I thought very much, even though I was very young. And so, although there were a lot of arguments and various types and everything, it didn't undermine my confidence.
Amazing.
And I just knew
It
that there was
grew.
another way.
Yeah, it probably grew your confidence in actual fact.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it challenged it all the time.
Yeah.
It was like
Yeah.
either I was going to give in, and I knew what the other option was, and I didn't really care for that option, or it was fight for what you think is right. And also, don't forget, I was born in the 60s, and standing on what you think and fighting for what you believe kind of was the fad at the time. So, that also, I guess, was a bit of inspiration.
Did you burn your bra?
Not physically, but metaphorically, I did.
I didn't mean to distract you. Go ahead. I do that sometimes. Continue.
So that's about it. So that paved the road. And actually, I started out as a dance major at UCI, University of California. And I woke up one morning. It was a time of rehearsals, and it was really rigorous. And I woke up in the morning and I realized that I was disconnected from my body, that there was this experience of my body having become a machine. It wasn't really mine anymore. It was taking orders from all these people in the rehearsal hall. And the whole point was just to be stronger, get your leg up higher, jump higher. And it just hit me that I couldn't be like that. I couldn't disconnect from my body in that way. And it was very clear to me that I given that, I just wouldn't be good enough to be a performer. I wanted to go into political choreography, but that really was way too early at the time in Israel. So I figured, okay, the next best is to work with dance injuries. And I started looking into that, and I don't know, I didn't really find anything that fit. And then accidentally, I came across an ad in the newspaper that announced interviews for the first course in alternative medicine. It was called then in Israel. I said, alternative sounds good. I'm going to go. And I went there and was accepted and started my studies in this whole field of complementary medicine. Very quickly, I understood that the manual stuff is not me. I'm better with my mouth than I am with my hands. And I was drawn into the emotional field, which was also the area or the methods that helped me the most, because there was always the search for a solution for myself, which was going on simultaneously, and that's where I really found the most help for myself. So it just became very clear that that was the direction I wanted to go in, and one thing led to the other, and here we are.
Wow.
Basically.
Tell us, did the psoriasis go during that time?
The psoriasis, it took a long time until I really found what works.
Till it clicks.
Till it clicks, exactly.
Yeah.
So I have long periods of totally healthy skin, but my skin continues to be my seismograph. So if I go out of balance and I start itching, then I know that I'm off balance, and then I know I need to get myself back on track. Because you see, there's something people really need to understand. This relationship between body and mind and emotions, it's an ongoing thing. Okay, you can think of it as a flow of information. Okay, that flows from the energetic field, the energy field, to the emotions, to the mental, to the physical. And unless you live in a bubble somewhere, life happens, things happen, we respond to them, they affect us. And so the emotions are constantly communicating this information to the body. So true, I mean, if you have pancreatic cancer, you want to know that it's out of the way, which can be done, but you have to understand that that doesn't mean that something else isn't going to happen if you went through another emotional trauma. So it's like we kind of have to readjust our definitions and expectations when we say healthy. And I think healthy is more about listening and picking up on the subtle messages that the body communicates to us all the time, rather than, be symptom free. The body creates symptoms when it's healing as well. Not all symptoms indicate a problem. And so when people ask me, I mean, are you cured? And I really don't know how to answer that question, because if my skin is clean now, I know that tomorrow, if something very dramatic happens, my skin is the organ that's going to respond first.
Yeah, it's going to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a guide, it's an indicator, it's a cursor. It directs me and just, keeps me focused and helps me stay on track. Yeah. So not all symptoms are a problem.
Could I also mention in that, Joan, that when you get a symptom, you now reflect. Mm-hmm. And could you expand on that a little bit for our audience? Because that's often the difficulty that people have. It's not that you're going to reflect immediately, but to draw that whole concept in to one's thinking. So, yeah, just sort of expand on that a bit more, because your reflective capacity seems like it was pretty strong, because as a teenager, you were already saying, this doctor doesn't really understand me, M-E, and you were pursuing sort of a different attitude. But this component of that reflection is often difficult for people to actually turn to. So just draw on that a little bit, about how that inner strength in you said, it's enough, I want to know more. And alternate medicine seemed to be the pathway, the joining up of the conventional medicine, the allopathic medicine, and the fact that, there's always been healers in our society, and that this complementary medicine draws it together. Could you expand on that a little bit for our audience, please?
Yes. I think that everybody actually is familiar with the connection we're talking about.
Mm.
Because, simple things like you're excited or nervous, okay, about an exam or a dental appointment or a date, and your stomach gets funny and you run to the bathroom or you get like a stress headache, that's body-mind connection, okay? So if I'm nervous about the interview, let's say, and my stomach gets all upset, so if you take that and you enlarge it, okay? Because being nervous about an interview is is emotional, but it's not a big emotional event. Let's say if we compare with, divorce or loss or, big dramas. So if little dramas create symptoms, then big dramas create bigger symptoms. That's the basics, okay? Um, I think that the medical establishment has taught us to look for the reasons outside of ourselves and not do that reflection. But
Yeah.
I think that people should ask themselves, you don't, it can be very challenging to do self-reflection, because you're all involved in what's going on. But nevertheless, I warmly suggest that when symptoms occur, just kind of ask yourself what's been going on in my life. What's been happening? What have I been responding to emotionally or dealing with emotionally? What upset me lately? What affected me lately? Just very simple, what's been going on in my life. The answers will usually be there.
That's right.
Mostly today I said to a patient, and I started to do this, and I thought I was really proud of myself and proud of like the work that Rose and I have been doing. And I said to him, what is your symptom saying to you? And, I think I created a safe environment for him to think, well, that's interesting, as opposed to, what are you, crazy? Because doctors are not asking, like, people are having a symptom and feeling like a victim. They're not feeling like, they're feeling like something's wrong. So I think what we're talking about is a change in the way that we address ourselves, the way we understand pain, the way we can see pain as a message. Something's changing in our generation, thank God. But you're right, medicine has made pain wrong. It's made pain bad. It's made cancer something we have to beat. And so we're talking right now about something shifting slowly, just what you're talking about and what Rose is talking about. The patient needs to self-reflect what's going on inside. And this is just so not the typical thing. That's my point. And
Well, what I'd like to add, and which was apparent in Rose, the way Rose phrased her question, is that reflection cannot always be done immediately. If somebody
Exactly.
if somebody is in acute pain,
yeah,
or they're in a life-threatening situation, or scared to death because the doctor just told them that they have 3 months left to live,
yeah,
they're not available
you're right.
to do the reflection. Okay,
That's correct. Yes.
so people need to feel comfortable with wanting more immediate resolutions in acute situations, which is very reasonable. But most situations, okay, are not life-threatening. And all in all, if you look over the past 10 or 20 years, the prevalence of chronic disease is on the rise. Disregard of all the medical development and the research and all the sophistication and the technology. Okay, so something isn't working. And it's that part where I think we really need to do self-reflection.
Yes. But our medical model tells us that it's an exterior thing. If I take this medicine, it will help me. Or if I have this SSRI for the next 20 or 30 years, I'll be balanced. But in actual fact, it's an internal thing. And seeing that it's an internal thing that we can fix ourselves is such an amazing discovery for people, isn't it? That discovery that it's within me. Yeah.
If I can just kind of sort of rephrase that a little bit. First of all, I think the medical establishment is focused on the symptom, not on the origin. Let's put it that way, the core roots cause. Um, and often the core root cause is emotional. When people go through big emotional drama, that alone can affect the body so significantly that will result in very dramatic symptoms. And now that in itself is sort of a new concept for many people, because the focus has been, we've got this symptom, we've got to make it go away. And often, when the symptom is suppressed and people feel better, and then it comes back or something else happens because the core source root wasn't addressed. But I think that people come to the medical establishment with a sense of not knowing, not able to, and not in control.
Mm.
And interesting, there was a research done by a collaboration between Israeli and US doctors that were exploring the profiles of people who had exceptional healing processes, people with very severe prognoses that turned around the situation and actually recovered. And, it's like they were asking, what is it about these people that they're able to do such a, impressive healing process? And what they found is that these people have strong personalities. They're very proactive. They don't agree with everything the doctor says. They research, they have an opinion, they have a standpoint. It's like they're really strong people that are involved in the healing process, even if it's a medical protocol. Okay. So, and they're the ones that make it through. And I think that says a lot. It just says a lot about what the inner resources are that really move healing to the next step.
They took full responsibility.
Totally. But they weren't out of control. You see, they came from a position that it's my disease, I manage it, just, with you, the doctor. I have an opinion. I know, I researched, I read, I have knowledge, and you just can't do whatever you want with my body. I have a standpoint here. And they won, which is amazing.
Yes, I love what you said, Joan, and you proved it, didn't you?
I have another story which is interesting. One of my clients has a respiratory condition. It's a chronic respiratory condition, and she has a sister who is very close to her in age, and they developed the same disease almost at the same time. Okay, so one sister, not my client, her sister, went the medical route. She did exactly what the doctor said, the whole package. 5 years later, she's a mess. Okay, she's on oxygen and the situation really deteriorated. My client didn't take the medical route because she said it didn't sound right to me that I would be on medication for the rest of my life. And she went and she did nutrition and she did acupuncture and she did emotional work. And she's basically free of symptoms. Now, I want, to sort of put a disclaimer on that may not be enough information to do a, professional comparison. But just by the story, same disease.
Anecdotally, it is. Anecdotally. Yeah.
I found it very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I hope that the sister believes that she can still turn things around. That's how amazing the body and mind are.
Well, I don't know. I'm not in contact with her. And also, I want to add that this doesn't mean to say that, nobody should go to doctors anymore. But I remember waiting for somebody outside of a pharmacy. And I was just kind of, watching the people going in and out. And people were walking out with like supermarket size bags full of medication. And I'm standing there thinking to myself, you mean to tell me that seems right to you? It's like it can't be right. There must be another way. And the fact that just, there are a lot of people that's just the reality. Once in 3 months, they go to the pharmacy, they get their a supermarket bag full of medications, and this one is for that one, and that one is from the side effects from the first one. And that's how they live. And I don't get it.
Well, I'd like to promote, because I'd like to say that, taking the medication is a huge feeling of safety for lots of people, and the relationship with the doctor, and they do feel better temporarily. And so
and there are also situations that it's inevitable. That
yes,
must be said.
Right.
Oh,
But
okay.
to do this work and take the medication is the perfect storm. It's the perfect scenario.
That is definitely an option also.
Yeah.
But I think that the awareness isn't, I'd like to see a rise in the awareness. I think it would better people's health.
Right. Listen, it is happening. It's happening slowly. And it'd be nice if the doctors could be the cheerleaders and say, look, here's the medicine, but why don't you go and put an ice pack on your neck and do some qigong, or, do some steam to get the mucus out of your nose, or, like, it would be great if they could say, why don't you do some nutrition? Come speak to my nutritionist, or why they could do that.
They could, but they wouldn't get too many customers, because people go to get a treatment, and the treatment has to be something like come home with some medication to make you better. I'd like to move over now to the idea of people taking something like the Dr. Bach sort of flower type remedies, because that's external, but it's also
no, it's not
internal.
external exactly. You take it in your mouth. It's not exactly external.
That's what I meant. It's something that you take, whereas it's actually does some difference. It creates some difference in the body. Would you talk about that a little bit more, so that people can see that they're taking something into their mouths like they would from the GP, but it's got a different model. It's being used in a different way. Am I clear?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
I'll just begin by saying that the Bach Flower remedies were developed by an MD. He was an MD, he was a bacteriologist and immunologist that graduated medical school, an English chap. But at some point, he was hired to work at the homeopathic hospital in London, which is where he was exposed to the ideas of homeopathy and body, mind, and energy, and Hahnemann's work. And at some point, he left. I'm making a long story short, and he developed these remedies. Okay, we'll go the short way. Okay, now
which are medications or herbs, right?
They're not manufactured, but they're extracted in the same way that homeopathy is, meaning that you don't get the substance of the plant, you get the energy of the plant by putting it in water. Okay, now homeopathy is kind of an issue. There's a lot of disagreement, let's put it that way, around homeopathy. But homeopathy is definitely the most brilliant medicine I've ever come across in my life. But okay, there's opposition from different areas. But anyway, what he did is he found these remedies that address specific emotional states, and he does so by addressing the energy frequency of the emotional or mental state. Okay, so what the remedies facilitate is the option of sort of hooking on to and addressing specific emotions. So if somebody is in anxiety or in anger or lack of self-confidence or I don't know, maybe preoccupied in their mind, I can address that specifically. Now, I don't know any other method that offers that kind of accuracy and efficacy. Okay, so
Wonderful. Yeah.
so it, but it doesn't address the physical symptoms. So what we need to do is use the physical symptom to direct us to the exact emotional states that are creating it and address the emotional state. And that's how it works, basically.
Would you mind giving us an example, Joan, as you did earlier on, about a mindset, a person's mindset, and then the symptoms?
Sure.
Yeah. So
Okay, we were talking about a client that came to me. It was 10 o'clock Friday morning, and she had acute pain down the whole side of her right body. No apparent reason, but she was really in pain. She said she couldn't stand in the kitchen and cook for Friday night dinner. So I told her, I said, let's give it a few hours, because obviously if I couldn't get the volume of the pain down, she would have to go see a medical doctor. But she couldn't think of anything unusual or that happened. So I asked her to describe the personality of the pain, the type of sensation, what it felt like. And she said, it's a sharp, burning pain. Okay? Sharp, burning pain on the right side of the body. Now, sharp, burning pain is typically associated with the anger family. Okay? So I knew, I didn't know at that point. I knew I had to look for something that really made her angry. And the right side of the body is usually associated with male energies. So I asked her if there was any male that she was really angry about lately. And she said, oh, yeah, sure. I had a terrible fight with my husband last night, and I didn't sleep all night. And she woke up with this sharp burning pain on the right side of her body. I said, okay. And I prepared remedies for her that addressed anger. And within 2 hours, the pain was gone. She was back in the kitchen and everything was okay. And then, of course, she had to work things out with her husband. But if you can imagine what she would have been put through if she had gone first to the doctor. Now, there's a fine line there, because there are situations. I had somebody walk in to my clinic off the street with acute abdominal pain. She was, she just sat and she couldn't hold herself up. And I said, I'm not doing anything other than calling an ambulance. Okay, so there is discernment that needs to be applied there, and you have to know when you have the few hours leeway and when you don't. Okay, that definitely.
You also had some intuition. You had intuition with each person.
But I'm not a medical doctor, and I have that in my mind all the time. So I don't take risks in that regard. But it didn't seem like threatening. I mean, she came to me independently. It wasn't like she was brought in on a stretcher or anything, but it was very uncomfortable. Okay, so I figured it's Friday. We have the 2 hours. Let's give it 2 hours. If we see it subsiding, then we know we're okay. And if not, then she'll go see the doctor. No problem. But it just worked like magic, because it just addressed the exact emotion that was motivating the pain. Now, this was acute, and we also addressed the emotion very near the time of the onset. What happens usually is people come in with chronic conditions that have been there for so long, they don't even remember what was going on in their life when the symptoms started. So it's much more challenging to work backwards. If something happens right now and you come to me now, that's the best.
Right.
But it doesn't usually work like that.
Okay, so give us an example of how the usual, because most of our audience is the usual.
Okay, so usually people come in after they've been to the doctor.
Or multiple doctors.
or multiple doctors. So
Uh-huh.
usually they have a medical diagnosis. Okay. Now, this is an example when people come with physical challenges, because there are also people that just come in times of crises, which is a totally different situation.
Mhm.
So if they come with physical disease and they've had a medical diagnosis, and usually they've either had a treatment protocol offered to them, or they're in it, they're doing it. So most of the time I work simultaneously with the medical protocol, but something led them to feel that they should explore the emotional component. So then I look at the disease, and I use two methods to try and understand what the conflict of origin was. One is called functional symbology, body symbology, and the other is the New German medicine. Functional body symbology draws the emotional component based on the physiological functionality of the organ. Okay, so I'll give a really simple example.
Yeah, can you expand as well?
Yes,
Like as an example?
yes.
Because we've got people with back pain, fibromyalgia, all of the various things that are listening to our program. So if we can use that specific example, like you did with the acute patient, now with the chronic patient, so people can actually see that story behind their own story, should I say,
Yes,
behind what you're describing.
yes.
Yeah.
I'll give simple examples. Let's take a really simple example, constipation. Okay? Constipation is a state where the gut, that's responsible for collecting and ridding the body of metabolic toxins, there's an accumulation of toxins that's stuck there. So emotionally, that would mean that there's a emotional toxins that are stuck there, that are not being released out of the body. Okay? Now, if I apply the New German medicine, the New German's medicine would say that things having to do with the intestines have to do with things that we have a hard time digesting. Okay? So the two of them kind of work together, because if there's something that you can't digest, that kind of means that it's stuck somewhere, right? Metaphorically, at least. And if it's stuck, then you're not releasing. You're not absorbing, you're not releasing, it's stuck. So then we have to find what you're not digesting. And I'll give an example. A woman, she had Crohn's disease, not constipation. And the emotional situation that she wasn't digesting was that a brother of hers died in very extreme, unusual, and circumstances, let's put that way, that had to do with malpractice. So she was angry, which connects to the inflammation, and she just couldn't digest it. She couldn't get over it. So we worked on that. And once we resolved that so that she could live with it and accept it because it was a fact of life, the Crohn's stabilized.
Wow.
But then she was stable for a few months, and then she called me and she said she's having an attack again. And I said, well, what happened? And she said, I don't know. Nothing happened. I have no idea. So I took her through a very specific type of visualization. And what came out is that the attack started around a holiday. And preparing for the holiday triggered the memory of him not being there. So the emotions that came up were longing and missing and a bit of anger again, and that triggered the attack. But it was out of her awareness because it was very subtle. She was preparing for the holiday, and I guess it went through her mind and she didn't really notice it, but it was enough to re-trigger the whole pattern. And so we addressed that, and the intestines calmed down again. So you have to really be able to pinpoint the emotional drama that's going on behind the scenes.
You really have to know yourself. You have to know yourself and know what
Sure.
this is where. Good, Bruce. Yeah.
No, it's about visualization. You're saying, isn't it? You got her to visualize what was going on when she was
No.
preparing.
It's a
No?
specific. It's a
Yeah, tell me.
specific sequence that's based on the use of association, free association, stuff like that, so that
Yes.
I bypass the conscious mind, the rational mind, and I can get insight into the subconscious mind.
Are you able to actually just give us a little nutshell about that, so people will sort of realize that there's a way of actually getting there? Can you just sort of draw on your experience a little bit more for our
Sure,
audience, please?
sure. Visualization uses the ability of the brain to sort of like imagine or
Mm-hmm.
visualize,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Mm-hmm.
a function that's built into the brain. But there are sequences where I can direct the visualization process in a way that gives me insight that helps me to see deeper into the subconscious mind. And that helps me to pinpoint what I need to address, especially in situations when people have a hard time being aware, or like this woman, she said, I don't know.
Yeah.
Everything was
Yeah.
okay. I don't know. So how it works in practicality is that the client sits in front of me with their eyes closed, and I guide them through it. And I take notes and everything. I document everything. And it's a whole sequence that takes them from the questions, give me associations or just throw out what comes to mind, to a place where it's like I restore calmness, balance, by introducing a calming energy. Also using the visualization.
So also, I mean, I learned from Rose over the last few years that ISTDP, um, it it helps to make the unconscious conscious.
Well, you could say that about this, I guess, also.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole idea, isn't it? Because once that unconscious part of you recognizes, for example, the Crohn's disease, when I think about the unfairness of what's happened to my brother, for example, and you think about that, you don't need the Crohn's disease anymore, do you?
True, but also
Yeah.
we have to remember that there are waves of this, because when you go through emotional conflict, there's an active phase where you're in the trauma, you're under stress, the sympathetic nerve system is all active and everything. And then the conflict resolves. Now, in the active stage, the body responds, okay, and you will get symptoms at that stage. But after the resolution, there will also be symptoms, because the body has to go back and correct the symptoms that it created in the active stage. So
Mm-hmm.
healing often involves temporary discomfort and various symptoms. Um, and also, what people need to be aware of is that, let's say that it works that way. It's a straight line. Okay. I went through emotional drama. My body helped me get through it. The conflict was resolved. I healed. But life goes on simultaneously. So while all that is going on, first of all, I could go through additional emotional drama. Plus, there may be triggers that rekindle that specific conflict that is now trying to heal. So it's a lot more complex than just saying, oh, your leg hurts, that's anger. Let's address the anger. The pain will go away, especially with dealing with chronic disease and, severe disease like cancers. And it's a lot more complex because we've got all these things going on simultaneously, and somehow you have to map it all out. So for that purpose, I developed a model which is basically a graphic representation of the data, which takes the physical data and positions it on a timeline. And then underneath that, I position the main emotional events throughout the lifetime. And I analyze the correlation between them. And it also helps me identify reoccurring patterns.
That's exactly what I was going to say, because some of the work that I've learned and that Rose and I talk about a lot is neuroplasticity. And people are having patterns, even if they've healed from the Crohn's or healing, the pattern still exists because
Exactly.
it's so. And if the person wants to attempt to make a new behavior, a new thought, a new action, to answer the threat with a more safe response, then they're changing the brain and a whole new pathway is being created. And that's kind of sounds like what you're saying.
Yeah,
Right?
but the advantage of what I do is before I try to introduce new behaviors or new patterns, first I want to disconnect the subconscious link to the memory in the past. It's like I want to reduce the effect the memory has because there was an original event that burned in the pattern, and that structure has the memory of what happened, it has beliefs in it, it has the experience in it, it has coping mechanisms, and it's a whole unit. Now, anytime anything happens in the present that subconsciously throws me back to that original event subconsciously, I'll respond just as I responded at the age when it occurred. You see?
Right. Yeah.
And it's like you can't get out of it because it's just automatic. So besides the fact that that means that many of us as adults respond as kids would to many, adult situations. But it means that until I dismantle that subliminal connection, anybody who wants to make a change in the present is going to have to use a lot of self-discipline to do it.
And how do you help them dismantle that?
Again, with a timeline type sequence that uses a visualization and association. But I can give a personal example of that. When I was 11, my mom asked me what I want for my birthday, and I said a bike. And she came back a while later and she said, "I'm sorry, we can't get you a bike. I don't know, we can't afford it this month." And I was really upset about that. It's like, why did you ask me what I want if when I say what I want, then you come back and say you can't give me what I want? I was really, really upset about that. But I was a kid, what can you do? And on the day of my birthday, there was a knock on the door. I opened the door and there was a bike all wrapped in ribbon and everything. So she wanted to surprise me. But the memory of that disappointment, years later, I realized that I had made a decision that I will not ask for anything from anybody.
Wow. Perfect. Perfect.
And it's like, here I am. I think I was about 40 when I figured that out, And until this day, if I have to ask for help, it doesn't come easy to me. I mean, I'm aware and I can do it, but it's not as natural and as easy.
You feel some anxiety first, you notice it, and
yeah.
And then you overcome it.
Yeah. And I mean, we're talking about 11 years old.
Mm-hmm.
It's ridiculous. But these things get burnt in because they're connected to the survival mechanism. So for me, the experience of disappointment was just so intense. I figured I don't want to experience that again. So I built this whole coping mechanism.
Could I add, it's usually within relationships. So that same coping mechanism wouldn't be required if there wasn't a relationship usually with someone. And I think that's a lovely, lovely thing that you've brought up, how important we as parents, how we treat our children. It's just so vitally important, because the pattern is set up, as Joan says, way, way earlier, and we don't even know. And people will say, well, I had a good childhood. Yes, they had a good childhood, but the hurting parts weren't repaired, and they just stay until they are repaired. So that's a lovely example, Joan.
Well, kids until the age of 6 are like a sponge. Anything you say just goes in. No filters.
And stays.
So, when you're a kid, you don't choose what you're exposed to. So if you were lucky enough to grow up in an environment that was all in all, empowering and positive, and yes, you can do it, you have a better chance. But if all you heard was, you're no good, nothing's going to become of you, it's a problem later on in life.
And the interesting turnaround is that your mom was
good intentions,
playful,
yes, exactly.
And yet this is where, Gabriel Maté will say, it's not the trauma, it's your experience of it.
Definitely.
And I'm sure that you didn't blame your mom. I'm sure that there's, but it's interesting. It's an interesting example, because I had, I'm just saying, I had a trauma with my mom and my parents, and I asked my brother years and years later, and he had a totally different take on it. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Even imagine.
And also you have to remember that what's burnt in is the experience from the perspective of the child. The fact that as an adult, I can look back and say, you're right, Tova. I mean, my mom had good intentions, and go, no, maybe my good intentions were interpreted, awkwardly by my daughter.
Right. And if there was a sibling that had the same thing, they might have perceived it differently. Like, I got my bike, who cares?
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's all that mishmash that I sort of unravel with people.
To this very day.
To this very day, yes. And I still work on asking for help.
See, it's the awareness. It's the absolute awareness. And that's the beautiful, it could have been a dark cloud. It could have been a big T, but it was a little T, and you're aware of it. You're in touch with yourself. You feel that uncomfortable feeling when you have to ask.
Like a cringe there.
No, you don't self-sabotage, or it's really important how you have been lucky to have learned that, and the people in your life,
Yes, wow. I think it really was a privilege. And it's another good example, because I was really angry a lot of my childhood because I felt that I was being lied to or cheated. And only later on in life did I realize how that prepared me and groomed me for what became my life mission, basically.
That's right.
Yes. And it's like, wow, that's really cool. I really appreciate that.
That's like homeopathy, isn't it?
A little bit, yeah. and the ability to look back and say, okay, when I was a kid, that was one thing. I, experienced it one way, but as an adult, I can totally change my perspective and see it in a totally different way.
What could we offer our audience? My thoughts went to having the rescue remedy in the cupboard. But what could we offer our people?
We are the rescue remedy. We are the rescue remedy.
Sure. But what if they want something in the cupboard? I mean, I'm just thinking not so much like something about self-reflection is always how I see it. But self-reflection is called mentalization, and there's drawbacks to it because depending on your trauma, you may not be able to do it very well. Yes. And of course, people that come to ISTDP, for example, that's one of their difficulties. So I'll have to work through it with them over many weeks.
But I must say that the work that I do on Zoom, I work internationally. It's not a problem at all. It doesn't necessarily need to be, face to face. So that's a possibility. But I actually want to give a different idea, if I may. The rescue
Definitely.
remedy is excellent, and it's the more known. It comes in
Yes, well,
drops. It comes in cream form. But I actually don't use the rescue remedy that much. There's another one that I use a lot more, and it's
good.
called cherry plum.
Wow. Tell
Now,
us more.
cherry plum is number 6 in the set. It's in the rescue. Okay, it's one of the components in the rescue. Now, cherry plum addresses situations when you feel like you're on the edge. That feeling where you come home and you've had a long day and you're tired and you're impatient, and you come home and your kid says one thing and you just explode all over the place. That's cherry plum. So cherry plum addresses the feeling that that's about to come when you say, one more thing, I'm going to lose it. Or if you've lost it already, okay, and you're screaming all over the place.
Listen, parents out there.
Okay. I always say cherry plum is the remedy for parents in August. August here is the end of the summer vacation. The kids have been home for 2 months and the parents are climbing the wall. Okay. So the cherry plum acts immediately. It's really.
But here's the beauty. I wish everyone had a bottle in their pocket and they knew to take it. Like, you have to remember to look at the notes of your reminders to take it. Like, it's an awareness that you have a choice.
Well, I must admit, okay, that obviously I have the set. I have a backup set, and as far as I'm concerned, they're just like my partners, my life partners.
Love it.
So I go to them first, actually. So, but I can understand that people will need to kind of get into this and used to it. But cherry plum, like when you talk about first aid, immediate response, totally amazing. Totally amazing. I don't know anything that works as fast as the cherry plum to take people away from the edge. Sometimes people come to me and they're just all over the place, and they're just so totally on the edge, and I say, I don't negotiate with people standing on the edge threatening to jump. I give them cherry plum for about a week and then come back and we'll talk again. Okay, because people just get so, it's like they can't handle things and it's just all over the place. So anything I would do would be ineffective anyway.
Do you think that it's the actual look? It's a remedy. It's a chemical. It's affecting the high.
It's affecting the energy system.
Yeah, like this is fast.
Yeah.
So, because also you're giving it to them, you're calming, they're trusting you. There's also a relationship. There's you, there's the remedy, and them.
Let me tell you a story. I have a friend who has a son. He was about, I don't know, maybe 17, and he had acute asthma and he was getting steroids. Steroids affect the brain. She calls me one evening. The kid is on the couch. He's absolutely out of control. He's screaming. He's, throwing his arms and legs, and he's just out of control. Do you think the remedies could help him? And I said, well, I'm not sure, because the cause is the steroids. It's not an emotional thing. It's a biochemical thing. But I said, I'll come over and we'll try. So the kid is and he's, a 17-year-old guy. I mean, he's a big guy. So the two of us had to hold him down, and I squirted the cherry plum into his mouth. And within seconds, the whole drama was done with.
Oh my God.
He sat up and he said, what's happening, guys? Amazing. Really, really amazing. So I prefer the cherry plum over the rescue remedy.
Lovely.
And I trust it, and it works every time.
Wow.
Could I ask you, many of our patients have what we would call melancholia, long-term grief. Could we actually talk about that for a minute?
Yes. Grief can take on many forms.
Mhm.
So I don't think it would be professionally correct to recommend a specific remedy because it could be one of many.
Mhm.
But grief can be can have an extremely negative effect on the body and on the emotional
Yeah,
system because it causes like a shutdown.
that's
So
right.
I think one recommendation would be to treat it, just to address it. Find somebody to help you address it. And especially if it's long-term grief,
Yeah,
I may even prefer the visualization over the remedies. The
right.
remedies could be an extra support, but actually I think the visualization would be more effective.
Because grief is often related to that. I mean, we use the example of the bicycle, but if we can, there's other types of grief from childhood. And that's where I was sort of coming from. That grief that you weren't heard, that's the sort of grief that I was thinking about. And that sort of melancholia sort of feeling about that experience. That's, yeah.
Not being heard or not being
Mm.
seen um,
Mm-hmm.
is a whole complex of feelings that have to do. I wasn't loved, I wasn't wanted, I don't belong. It has a lot of loneliness in it, and that actually does have a specific remedy for it. But
Mm-hmm.
it would need to be tweaked and addressed in a way that's suitable for each person and their experience. But that's a
Okay.
huge one, Rose.
Yeah,
A lot of people with chronic disease have that at the core. I
that's
just wasn't
right.
loved, and I'm not loved. I'm not worthy of love.
Mm.
Yes, this
And
feeling of
yet
being
the
alone in
parents,
the world.
yeah. And it could be that the parents were preoccupied with their own problems and weren't able to give that reflection back to the child. But it's a deep set emotion, repression that, I'm not loved and I'm not lovable.
Yeah.
And I thought if there was a rescue remedy for that you could mention, that would be lovely, but fair
Well,
enough.
anytime any of the emotions become very intense and you feel like you just can't handle it, the
That's what
cherry
I'm
plum,
thinking.
the cherry plum is always an option just to bring it back into the threshold. Because
Wow.
the cherry
Fantastic.
plum is where we kind of go over our threshold.
Excellent. Now, can we buy that at the pharmacy? Or do
Well,
we have to
here
go
in
to?
Israel,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that they sell the cherry plum at Superfarm, but I think it can be ordered. Or you could contact a practitioner here in Israel.
Mm.
I don't know how it's distributed in other places of the world. I've had
Sure.
clients in the States that have found them at Whole Food stores.
Right.
Okay. Oh,
So
really? Oh, okay.
but if there's pain, if there's, anxiety driving the pain, um, you calm the client down regarding the pain because you want to get to the cause, which is the anxiety or the emotion.
Or the fear.
So basically, once you do that, the pain or the symptom resides.
Well, my experience is that anxiety is often a secondary emotion, not a primary emotion, because pain itself causes anxiety.
Right.
But
Right.
usually there's a much more specific emotional conflict. Rose, you mentioned back pain before. I had a client that was literally in bed for 3 months due to back issues that started following a big financial thing that he got involved with and lost a lot of money and all the emotions that go along with that. But it was his lower back, and the lower back is associated with financial issues. And of course, when he was in bed and totally debilitated, there was a lot of anxiety, but it wasn't the anxiety that was the primary. It was the whole thing with the finances.
Which was related to fear, I'd imagine.
Which was actually related to feeling not up to standard. You know, he grew up in one of these houses where he was told his whole life that he's not worth anything and nothing is going to become of him. And he just sort of proved that in his own way to himself because he had taken that in without really knowing. So it was more about that than it was fear. The fear was secondary.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing. So sometimes someone will walk into your clinic and it won't need, I mean, what besides the visualization and the rest and the Bach
Remedies.
Flowers remedy, which is really quite amazing. I've recently just heard about that from a very close friend of mine who's a professor of this work. And she's taking Bach remedies all the time. Like, she, you know, it's just unbelievable. Like, I'm
Our
really,
secret.
it's like pink cars. Like, I'm seeing pink cars. I'm seeing Bach remedies. And I'm blown away by also nature and from the ground. I mean, look, we have marijuana cannabinoids in us also. I'm really just I'm just fascinated by the people that, you know, we've been meeting. And
I think what's important that people take from this interview and probably from all of your shows is that there are a lot of options out there
Absolutely.
that we don't know enough about.
Exactly.
But if you're curious enough and you ask for help, even looking for, you know, what you need, you'll most likely find a whole array of options and methods. Not all of them may be appropriate for your condition, but it's like just keep your mind open. The medical establishment is there and they do good work in saving lives, less good work in chronic disease, but they're not the only option. And that's what's important. It's like you can always default back to medications. That's okay. You know, I mean, there are people that come to me that say, you know, I've been to all different treatments, nothing helped me. What's going to be different about you?
right.
Which is kind of a bad place to start from, but it does happen. Okay. And I, you know, and I always say, you know, what do you have to lose? You're not in, you know, in a life or death situation. Give it a chance. And another thing I want to say is that in these type of treatments, the client or the patient, their cooperation, which is not only a mental cooperation, can make the difference between a
Of
successful
course.
treatment and unsuccessful
Right. Like when
treatment.
you say to them, try it, it's like you could also say, I'm sure you do, is, you know, this will work if you're 2 feet. John Sarno would say 2 feet in, not one.
Yeah.
So I'm
And
sure.
I also try to be as clear as possible about what it's going to involve. You know, I always say you can't make change without changing. You know, it's like, and
It gets
people
out of
don't
your
like
comfort
change.
zone, out of your comfort zone. That's when you grow.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so
So it's like
true.
there's a lot
Yeah.
of components here that really have to kind of synchronize well together to get the best results. And when we don't get good results, sometimes it's because of the practitioner, but sometimes it's because of the patient. You know, because quote unquote, because there just wasn't enough dedication or cooperation or you know, just things like
What do
that.
you think about belief? Like belief is not as simple as like, oh, you have to believe. It's deeper. Their belief. It has to do with their patterns. It has to do with their trust. It has to do with their
It's all part of
relationship.
the package. Yeah.
You know, because belief
But I
is
really like when people come and say, "Oh, we don't believe in the remedies." I say, "Okay, I didn't ask you to believe. I just asked you to take them like I tell you to."
I love you.
Okay? I didn't
yeah, but belief is
and they take them and
important.
it works.
But belief, but the belief of like this will work. I think I'm big on placebo.
There's no question that belief will enhance, okay? But the remedies work for babies, they work for animals, they work for
No,
plants.
I asked a
There's no belief
homeopatist.
there.
I know.
I saved a German shepherd from death with the remedies. There was
Whoa.
a virus in the neighborhood. All the dogs that got this virus died. Okay? the shepherd, I don't know, I took him to the vet. The vet did whatever he thought needed to be done. I call him. He said, this is it. I don't have any other ideas. You do all those crazy things. Give him one of your concoctions. He said, I don't know what to do anymore. And I did. I prepared a remedy. I put it in his water. Plus, I gave it to him orally every hour.
Wow.
And within 12 hours, the dog was completely healthy.
Unbelievable.
Okay, there's no belief there.
Yeah, I heard about that with a horse because I said to my homeopathist friend, come on, what if someone doesn't believe? She goes, it doesn't matter if someone doesn't believe in it. It has an effect. And I'm like, okay.
It's an energetic effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. And homeopathy is in medication. Medicines are made from
No, but it's a different, yes, but it's a different method of preparation.
It is true. It is true.
Yeah. I think that when we're looking at plants and that, we're looking at the energy that created them, and that energy is still in them.
Yes.
And when we're actually looking at putting a bit of a test tube thing isn't quite the same, because we're looking at sort of without the energy.
As soon as they're processed, they lose their energy.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and there we are. We're now food. Food is your medicine also.
Agree.
How do you feel? Do you feel like when your clients have a good nutrition program, it just enhances their healing?
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Yes. I think nutrition is a very important component.
Wow.
Well,
Definitely.
I mean, we're an energy field, aren't we?
Oh.
So,
A few weeks ago, we had him on the Hebrew show, and then Rose, we really enjoyed him. He's an Israeli, Ilan Azulai. He's a sound therapist, and it was fascinating about the frequency and water in our body and the water. It was just like unbelievable. I mean, this is science. This is not new age at all. This is very, very grounded.
And you know what that proves is that we are so affected by anything that our senses are exposed to.
Wow.
And we really need to talk about psychic hygiene. You know, it's like what enters our psychic space. And I think that, you know, especially in the last 2 years, we were bombarded with energies that just weren't positive to our whole system.
No, our health was so threatened on so many levels. Our health the last 2 years, and you know, we're seeing effects of it. But I'm just so privileged. I'm going to start to round up because I'm running on empty here, like Jackson Brown a little bit. See my eyes drooping a little bit. Where Joan, you're probably got your energy rose this morning, and I'm just like, well, you taught tonight, Joan, at 9:00. You got finished teaching at 9.
No, I gave a lecture tonight.
So would you come back again? Because there's more to talk about here. And Rose, what an amazing conversation. And you guys didn't even meet. So there's more to talk about. We're inviting all of you back because I say Rose and I are going till age 120. Because Rose and I are the same age. We're gonna be here till 120, and we're gonna be having a show once a week on a Monday. That's the way it's gonna be.
Okay. Good night, you two. Now, could I just wind up and just talk about? I just want to wrap this conversation up. And one of the areas we didn't actually speak about, which is very important, is from an emotional point of view, a spiritual point of view, and see that our whole body needs that spiritual component as well. And Tova and Joan were talking about in the last 2 years, but this
no, it's not only.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes, I agree.
Yes, yeah. And so as we wrap up, just be aware that our mind and our bodies and our spiritual lives are all one. With whatever it is that this energy that we've got, we've actually got to gather it all together and honor it. Maybe I'm not sure, but I just want to add that as a final sort of putting the whole picture together. And thank you so much, Joan, for your time.
It was really a
It's been
pleasure.
so wonderful. Yeah. And I hope that people are able to see this on YouTube and actually gather that sort of courage to sort of open their minds and their hearts to their full lives. You know, we've got people like Bessel van der Kolk and all those that talk about the body keeping the score. So we know the literature is out there. We know the practitioners are out there. And if we just tune in, we'll find a space. So thank you so much.
Tonight's show was all about applying it and implementing it in our lives. So it is available. It's just not up here. We can bring it to our hearts and our soul, like you said, Rose. And Joan, you just gave a beautiful explanation of many wonderful insights.
And maybe just one last sentence, if I may.
Yeah.
You know, it's a process, and we're human, and we have ups and downs. And there are times where we're able to pay attention and we really get it. And then there are times that we're not. And that's okay. That's how it is.
Yeah.
So if you are in a process of self-revelation or self-reflection, it's not a straight line, and be okay with that. Don't beat yourself for it. And, you know, oh, how did I miss that? I didn't see that. I should have, I could have. Just be with what is. And it'll come with time. Practice makes perfect here, just like in anything else. And just be compassionate and be good with what is.
Yeah. Love what is. Whatever arises, love that.
Yeah, just accept it. You know, okay, so today I'm having a bad day. I missed it. Okay. You know, that happens.
Yeah. Absolutely. Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, I'm very excited that you came on our show here, and we will all meet again. That's for sure. Have a wonderful night. Sleep well, Rose. Have a wonderful day, and we'll all be in touch. All the best.
Bye.
Good night. Bye.
Good night. Bye.
Okay.